Thanks so much. So thanks so much for everybody to everybody for coming today. We're super excited to host this webinar for you. Again, this is helping digital publishers find the right monetization model, and we have some really great experts about the topic today. The people you're going to be hearing from are first Sachin Kamdar of Parsley. Parsley is an analytics platform that provides audience insight for digital publishers. They help answer questions about how readers respond to content. You're also going to be hearing from Ben Lack. Ben's the person that was just speaking. He is with SwiftType, and SwiftType is a hosted search solution that lets site owners deliver powerful, customizable search for their websites. And I'm Matt Weinberg. I'm going to be moderating today. I'm the co-founder of Vector Media Group, and we are a full-service digital agency that's located in New York City. And we've worked with Parsley and SwiftType many times. They're both totally great services, and these guys are both experts on the topic. So again, thanks everybody for joining us. A couple housekeeping items before we continue. One thing is that all of the slides will be PDF'd and provided afterwards. So don't worry if you miss a slide or want to go back to it or want to share with colleagues or clients or anything afterwards. Besides the slides being PDF'd, we are recording the whole webinar, and we'll be able to share the audio and the whole presentation as well. We will have time for Q&A at the end. If you have questions, please enter them into the GoToWebinar question interface that all of you should have on your screens. I'll be looking at them and asking Sachin and Ben to answer them as context comes up, and at the end when we do a whole Q&A area. Finally, we have a couple poll questions that we'll be asking throughout. You should see a poll interface on your GoToWebinar. We'd really love if people could participate in this poll because we think it'll drive conversation and help us tailor the content to what all of you want to hear about. And then the one other final thing is that at the very end of this, after the Q&A, there is going to be a survey. It's a quick survey. It's only 2 minutes. It'll pop up after we finish the webinar. We'd really appreciate everybody filling out the survey if possible. It helps us understand what worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear about next time. And that's all the housekeeping. So all of that said, I'd love to start with Sachin. And Sachin, will be presenting, as I said, from Parsley today.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for taking the time to walk through this webinar with us. As Matt and Ben said, we're both really excited about this, and I'm going to be sharing some info that we collected at Parsley from some of our customers. So at Parsley, as Matt kind of described, we are a online analytics platform, and really what we try to do is we try to demystify analytics for everyone at the organization. Analytics and data has been something historically that's been kind of locked behind the desk of the analysts or the data scientists, and we try to bring that down to a level where everybody has access to the right type of data, the right type of insights to grow their audience, drive loyal audiences, and ultimately grow their businesses over time. So what's really nice about Parsley is we work with hundreds of premium publishers across the world, and we have this really interesting network of publishers that we can talk to about things like monetization. And so what I'm going to share with you guys today is actually kind of two different parts. One is walking through a survey that we sent out to our customer base and the market at large about the state of digital media, and there's some questions that are focused on monetization there, which I'm going to share with everyone. And then the second part is actually delving into a case study that we did with one of our customers, Business Insider, around one way to monetize, which is through native ads. So let's talk about the survey first. So this was a survey that we had open from September of last year to November of last year. We had more than 300 responses to the survey. They were comprised mostly of professionals in the digital publishing industry, and they ranged from editors to digital analysts to audience development professionals and executives at these different organizations. So we, in this presentation, we're going to go over some of the multiple choice responses and the top trends that were reported in 2015. So the first thing we wanted to look at is confidence in the overall success of digital media industry. We looked at that in 2015 and 2016. And so even though we had a lot of things happening in 2015, some which could be seen as bad from the lens of monetization, like the ad blocking apocalypse, or the dominance of Facebook as referral traffic, it was actually pretty interesting to see that when people were looking forward in 2016, the confidence was pretty much the same. So there wasn't really a waiver in the way that they were thinking about digital media overall, which we think is a good thing. And in fact, it went up a little bit when they compared 2015 to 2016. Another couple of questions that we asked is the biggest source of revenue for your organization in 2015. Not surprisingly, or maybe surprisingly, traditional advertising still dominates. And so even though there is a lot of conversation about multiple ways to make money or multiple revenue streams, ultimately it's the traditional advertising, the display ads, the banner ads that are dominating how publishers are making money, at least in the year of 2015. I also think it's kind of interesting that 22% don't know. Maybe that's the first thing that we should do is get a handle on where revenue is coming from. The other question we asked is how do you predict digital media outlets will make money in 2016? And so overwhelmingly, what we saw here is that the revenue is going to come from a combination of streams. So not just mobile, or not just traditional advertising, not just native ads, not just paywalls, but a wide range of different sources that will help them grow over the course of 2016. And we'll get into some of the different ways in a second here. We also asked our survey responders what was the most notable trend in digital media in 2015, and 60% of digital, 33% rather of digital publishers said that mobile is overtaking desktop. That was the biggest trend that they saw in 2015. Social distribution was also a big point in 2015. When we think about the biggest challenge for 2016, though, overwhelmingly, the biggest challenge was monetization and thinking about how they can grow revenue streams over the course of this year. And so for many of these, it's kind of combined with how our respondents were thinking about the different revenue sources. It's trying to do more with what they have right now. So not just thinking about one stream of revenue, but thinking about multiple stream of revenues and how that's going to help build businesses over time. And so that really talks to the path towards monetization here. So obviously we have traditional advertising, but more and more companies we see are leveraging the fact that they are notable brands and they can use those brands as a form of making money through a variety of different means. So not just traditional ads, but native ads, thinking about e-commerce tie-ins, thinking about affiliate marketing, paywalling certain parts of their site, dealing with events in the community more. And so it's not just enough, I think, for you to be thinking about one way to monetize, but really you should be thinking about if I had to select 2, 3, 4 different ways to do it, how will I do that and how does my audience resonate with each? For example, if you're really good with high life cycle content, more evergreen content, that might be more affiliated with an e-commerce style play of marketing versus an audience that's very social driven, which might be more in line with native advertising. So really being able to understand your audience clearly, using data-driven methodologies, and then tying that back to different paths towards monetization, picking your top 2 or 3 can be a key way to drive it. So let's look at one business case study in particular, which is Business Insider, whom we work with at Parsley, and they really use our analytics to drive one form of monetization, which is native advertising. So native advertising is interesting overall because it's a growing source of revenue for a lot of different companies. What we're seeing is about $4.3 billion will be spent on native ads this year, and that's up about 34% from last year. The question might be, why is native advertising important? Why is this making a comeback? And I think it really falls down 2 different reasons, which is first, native ads are almost a backlash against kind of traditional display ads, where a lot of the concern in the ad industry is around ad blindness related to those ads. But if you have something that is falling in the direct feed of content, something that is capturing the attention of the audience in a more sort of both concise and strong way, then this is a better sale back to the brands and the agencies that want to engage with you, because this is a big problem for them. Two, it's leveraging what publishers are great at, which is creating content. And so a lot of the native ads that are being pushed out there, a lot of the custom content that's being pushed out there, are just remarkable pieces of content in and of themselves, and we can talk about examples of those too. So for Business Insider, they actually use Parse.ly in a couple of different ways. So they use this to basically focus on the data component of it. One of the big ways that you can drive repeat spends with native ads is by showing them the power of the content that you created there. And so putting them in the driver's seat in relation to sort of data and what audiences are resonating with it can be a really powerful factor here. And so Parse.ly helped facilitate that mechanism of getting more data into the hands of not just their own content teams and editorial teams, but in the hands of the brands and advertisers too. Further, we're able to classify information based off of tags. So if you're running a multi-content campaign, we're able to group that into one, show the audiences overall what's working, and then give you detailed information about how they're performing so that you can engage with them moving forward. And then finally, pulling a lot of this information can take a lot of time, and so we're able to help them find that information efficiently, saving them the time on the sort of content team overall. So this would be an example of what you would potentially see here in terms of delivering them the right type of analytics, where they know that with this sponsor post, I was able to drive 100,000 visitors, 200,000 views. Stuff that you're not seeing here is how that traffic was coming to the articles. Was it social-driven, search-driven? What are the types of authors that are creating this content that are really resonating? And so all of this is giving both the team power, but also the brand power, and treating them like part of your team overall to really kind of engage them and hopefully drive that repeat business over time. So that's kind of the quick overview of what I wanted to focus on related to monetization and native ads and one of our current customers, Business Insider. Here are all the ways that you can learn more about Parse.ly. For me, it's just Sachin@Parse.ly.com if you want to contact me to talk more about this. I'll turn it back over to you, Matt.
Great, thanks so much. That was really fantastic. One of the things that we talked about before is that we were going to have a poll, and our poll has some interesting, I think, relationships to what you just talked about. So if people that are listening could answer the poll that just popped up, that would be really helpful. While you're all answering it, I think this is interesting because we talk about how digital media outlets are going to make money coming up, and one of the things we've seen is that we've seen, at least in an agency world, in my agency world, is that there's not a lot of like commonality in the answers here. So some of our clients are doing mobile, some of our clients are doing native, some of our clients don't want to do native stuff at all. They feel like that's a weird mix of the editorial side, and they only want to do paywalls or subscriptions. Some of our clients feel like paywalls and subscriptions are more reliable because they have like that direct relationship of the content that they're making themselves. So it's been pretty interesting. At least on the agency side, for us, we've seen a lot more interest in the paywall subscription side in the last, 6 months. I think ever since a lot of that like ad blocking conversation happened. But it's definitely interesting. And so if we look at the results of the poll that the audience put out here, it looks like the vast majority of people, 74%, are saying a combination of revenue streams. I think that's really interesting. I think that in the past you would have big publishers that only relied on like traditional advertising, and actually here 0% of people answered that. So I don't know, Sachin, what do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that the vast majority of people here are saying that media outlets are going to use the combination of revenue streams as opposed to just traditional or just native.
Yeah, so I think what everybody wants is almost kind of a silver bullet answer here, where it's like, here is the way to make money with content and with digital publishing, but ultimately the publishers that we work with are so diverse in both the type of content that they're creating, how they're able to drive audiences, that ultimately it comes down to how well you understand your audience and then how well you can translate that into an opportunity on the monetization side. And so it's not surprising to me that the survey responses are all over the place, or they're focused on a combination of revenue streams, because I think rather than looking externally at what other publishers are doing, it's almost more important for you to have a clear understanding of what you're doing first. If you find that you are more aligned with a certain type of audience that is more inclined to pay for content, or another type of audience where they're more inclined to use mobile, or another type of audience where you know that the type that you have is so attracted to large brands that native advertising makes sense, then you're going to go those different routes. But it all starts with first understanding your audience, understanding your content, and making the most sense of that to take the next step.
Great. And we did actually get a question for you that I think is very relevant for this as well. One of the audience members asked, how will instant articles impact the viability of paywalls? Will instant articles make paywalls harder to enforce? I would also put something like Google AMP in that bucket as well.
Yeah, and so Facebook Instant and Google AMP, in my opinion, in the digital media industry, every year there's like a lot of things that are talked about, and a lot of them get a lot of hype, and a lot of them enter the echo chamber, but ultimately when you look back on the year, there's really only one or two things that have sustaining power. And I actually think that distributed content is one of those things, that we're going to see distributed content become more and more prevalent over time, and Facebook Instant and Google AMP are two ways that that's going to happen. Regarding kind of the question directly, a lot of people see that as a downside, but there's a big upside to these distributed content plays, and it really comes down to the fact that you're going to be able to reach new audiences that you probably never would have been able to touch before. And so when you're thinking about these different plays like Google AMP and Facebook Instant, in my opinion, you should be really thinking about them as a marketing opportunity. How do I touch more audiences? How do I reach more people that I couldn't reach before? And then how do I funnel them back into my site as like a traditional marketer would think about with how they're trying to reach new audiences. And so if you can have a clear strategy around that, it actually can be a big boon for something like a paywall, because you're getting more people into the funnel overall, and hopefully that conversion math works out where more people are subscribing to your content at the end of the day.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've one more quick question for you before we send it over to Ben.
Sure.
I was a little surprised to see that only 3% of people said mobile ads, and maybe that's because most of those people said it would be a mix. But do you feel like there are still technical challenges to implementing mobile ads? Do you think people are still just trying to figure out what the best formats are, or do you think there's something else going on? Do you feel like there's a lot of potential there that's untapped, or do you feel like it's being figured out? It's gotten figured out.
Well, the big challenge with mobile when you're trying to go from a full-fledged website to a mobile site is that there's just simply less real estate. And if you have less real estate, you have less places to put ads just inherently as a consequence of the fact that it's small, right? And so I think that's the big challenge. And so the question is then, can you charge more for the ads that you have on mobile to hopefully recoup the fact that you're losing real estate overall, ad real estate overall? I think there's some people that are trying to figure that out. I think the other opportunity is really kind of in the native content side too, where native content can kind of live well on a mobile platform because it's not kind of an ad real estate, it's just another form of content that people are looking at or reading through. So I think there's just a lot of kind of inherent challenges based upon the fact that it's mobile that people are dealing with right now. But I don't think that it's an unsolvable problem, and I think we'll see more and more people come out with clear strategies around how to monetize mobile this year.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. Okay, well, thank you so much for presenting about that. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ben.
Sure.
Thanks, Matt, and Sachin, nice job. And hello to everybody that's on the session. My name is Ben Lack. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Business Development for SwiftType. SwiftType is the largest dedicated site search provider on the internet. We have over 500,000 unique search engines on our platform today, and currently are powering about a little over 5 billion monthly queries. Some of our largest customers have over 150 million pages that we're indexing, and we serve over 50 million monthly queries. So we're funded from some VCs here in the Valley, and we're based in San Francisco. This is a quick snapshot of some of our customers. We work in the e-commerce space, as well as the knowledge-based self-service support space, as well as helping corporate clients with their multiple sites. But the publishing space is certainly a big chunk of the work that we do in search, because this engagement question is so large, and monetization is such an important topic that's on the top of people's minds. So I want to kind of change the frame of the conversation a little bit to the search space, because that's where we know a lot about, and can really provide some good things to think about as you think about your search experience. And I want to start with our own poll question, which is, what types of ads are you currently running on search results pages? Is it nothing? Are you delivering sponsored articles and content? Are there any types of display that you have on pages? Are you using any kind of a third party, or is there any kind of a mix? For us, we tend to see things all across the board. And so I'll give everybody another 10 seconds, 10, 15 seconds to answer, because we've got most people voting in right now. But this will help kind of frame the conversation that I want to share with you today as you're thinking about how to deliver ads for folks that aren't currently monetizing the search experience, as well as for folks that are, how to find ways to optimize the ads while making more money for yourself, but also making sure that you're delivering the kind of experience that your audience is going to expect. So here are the poll results. 32% of you aren't currently monetizing search results today, which is kind of what we see, followed by doing some type of mix as well. We see also a good number of clients focused on display, and then a growing number of folks starting to include ad networks into their sites, search engine result pages, as well as sponsored content. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to kind of jump into kind of why everyone is in business, because I think it kind of helps to understand, and this isn't, at least for the next couple of minutes, not something you don't already know, but it probably just helps to remind yourself that at the end of the day, the goal of the business is to ensure that your audience is able to find what they're looking for, while also being able to discover new topics and content that your publication or property is delivering. And that's essentially the service you're providing, is you're providing that news or knowledge or insight into what those folks are looking for, because they're searching for something. So if you do this well, your audience is going to be pretty happy with you, and the result of this will be more engagement with your properties, higher satisfaction. They'll trust you more because the content that you have is going to be high quality and relevant and to what they want. And if you're doing a really great job, they're going to promote you to their friends and their networks and their families, and because you will, and they'll say, hey, X, Y, and Z has really good content, or did you read this article or this video or this piece of content about something, it was really, really good. You should read it for a good reason or a bad reason, something that's thought-provoking. And ultimately, it's going to be good for your business, because at the end of the day, your brand is going to be the thing that you can defend, that you need to defend in order to, protect yourself against your competitors and to grow your business. And so, if done right, your business is going to receive, more tactically, more page views and higher time on site metrics, which is ultimately going to lead to more revenue, which allows you to not only establish a deeper relationship with your advertising partners, because they're getting the types of results in terms of awareness or lead gen that they're looking for, but you're able to try more things and hire more people and be creative with some new initiatives that you've been wanting to do for a long time, and build a business that that's sustainable. So at the end of the day, it's all going to come down to the user experience and the expectation that your audience has with you. Now, Google has done a really good job in the global search space, creating an expectation that when somebody searches for something in the internet, that they're very likely going to find what they're looking for. And Google's got a lot of people behind the scenes, making sure that the results that their users receive when somebody does a search on the internet is going to be the thing that folks are looking for. The experience is very different on a web page, on your own website. And so what happens when your search box delivers a page that has 0 results? It's unfortunately something that's very common, and unfortunately probably one of the worst experiences that you can provide. And so the key thing that we really work with clients to think about is, how do you solve these user experience problems that are coming from search, so that not only can you provide the expectation that your audience is looking for, but more importantly, or probably equally as importantly, finding a way to monetize that relationship. So Parsley and SwiftType did a webinar last year that is an intro into the analytics, both in terms of a lot of the data that Parsley captures in their platform, and then the data that we capture in ours, so that folks like you can really make very good decisions around how you can monetize those analytics and insights. What I want to kind of do today is talk about 4 insights or buckets of insights that I think are going to be useful from the search space, that you can really, you should kind of start with and really think about how to create some plans around for you and your teams. And so for the next couple minutes, I'm going to discuss query volumes, content engagement, search engagement metrics, and conversion insights. So for query volumes and content engagement, this tends to talk about top searches, the searches that come from an autocomplete if your site is delivering an autocomplete experience, and then top engaged content. There's a lot of ways that publishers and online media sites are leveraging this data. Number one, editorial teams are using this to help guide their editorial calendars. So if you're finding that the election is really something that a lot of your audience is searching for, that's very helpful at a very top level, broad theme of the types of content you want to look for. But because you can also start to drill down into some of the smaller amounts of queries, you can start to find some nuggets around very specific types of queries that folks are searching for around the election that maybe your editorial team is or is not covering as well as maybe you should. And so this is an exercise that you guys should be having with these analytics on a fairly regular basis, to just check in and make sure that you are tapping into the pulse of what your audience is looking for. As a quick reminder, this data is intent data, which means the user and the audience is telling you what they're looking for. And so to really spend time on why that's the case, it's going to provide a lot of good results at the end of the day. I'm going to put a quick ping for the importance of an autocomplete experience. I know this is about monetization, but an autocomplete experience is really important because you want to get that user to the content that they're looking for, the answer they're looking for, as quickly as possible. And for many of the sites that we've engaged with, there's no autocomplete experience there. Someone actually has to type in the search and then hit enter. And whether that's done on a desktop or on a mobile phone or iPad, that's really, that's fine. But there's an opportunity for growth there, and especially in mobile, where the keypad isn't nearly as large as an actual, laptop computer. Being able to guess and with relevancy and accuracy what that user is, what your audience is searching for, is something that's really important. So just kind of keep in the back of your mind that having an autocomplete experience is very important. And there are a lot of ways that you can design that autocomplete experience to really enhance not just having a list, but really being able to show your brand as well. Because again, this is about your brand. So I know we talked about the top searches and the autocompletes. It's also important to talk about the content itself and understanding what content is actually being engaged with in search. And so if you know that you've got certain teams talking about certain things and that content really is resonating, and you can click through and see the different queries that those folks are typing, that your audience is typing in to get to that content, that resonates with certainly your team, because now you're saying, great, this work that we're doing is really being put to a good cause. So that's my rant on the query volume and content engagement. I want to spend a couple minutes on search engagement metrics, because I think this is really important for some of the other ways to improve the actual search experience. So this is a screenshot of an insight that we have found to be really rather important. We kind of showed you that funny slide with the where you're not getting any results. And this is something that you should be tracking absolutely right when you get off this session. And if you don't know where to, you can either find it in Google Analytics or come talk to us and we can help you. But what you should be doing if you don't have results is kind of a couple of things. Number one, you can take existing content that you already have and work with your teams to make sure that that content populates for that specific query. The second thing is that if those are queries that are interesting and meaningful, then have your teams go create content to fill the results, and then test to see if that content actually engages with your users. And you can do that by looking at time on page and exit rates and that sort of thing. Another one interesting insight you should really pay a lot of attention to is the searches that don't generate any click-throughs. So you're generating hundreds of thousands or millions of queries, or maybe even tens of thousands of search queries every month. That's a meaningful amount of data for you to be able to find out, for the low-hanging fruit or for targeted campaigns or things that you guys are working on, what's not being engaged with. And so the actions here is, if they're not engaging with the results that are being delivered, it's going to be for a couple of reasons. Number one, the meta tags that we have or you have isn't as detailed enough as it should be. And so there might be some ways to categorize your content with additional data to ensure that the relevancy is as high as possible. The second thing that's worth considering is doing some testing. So, the obvious thought is to just delete the content and put in new content. We actually suggest that you title and description test and do A/B testing on that, because it doesn't necessarily mean that the content is bad. It just means that your titles and descriptions aren't pulling your audience in to want to click through. And so that's important, something important to test first and look into first, and then see if that's not working. Well, then maybe really it is the content. And for companies that have ad optimization teams already, you're doing this to ensure that your content is showing up in a global search experience. So it's kind of like an offshoot of doing that now for your site search experience, and something that you should kind of talk through with your team. The next insight that's worth discussing is seeing multiple clicks in a search result experience. So this can be good or bad, and it requires a little more investigation. So if somebody goes to query something and sees a result, and they click into many things, the way you're going to know if it's good or bad is by looking into the time on page or pages of after search, and then the exit rates themselves. And I'm going to caveat by saying you need to also look at what the content actually is that's showing up in those queries, in those end results. If the content is a very long form article and the time on site, or time on page, excuse me, is a couple of minutes, then what it means is that your user has actually really enjoyed the content that they're reading. They're now going back to that search and wanting to consume more. That's phenomenal. That's great. Let's find ways to do more of that. If you're finding that the time on page is 5 seconds or less, then it means very quickly that they're bouncing. And you're going to take the same kind of steps that you're taking when your audience is bouncing other pages, and try to find ways to make sure that that's relevant. So this is an important metric, especially for those that have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of queries a month. And then finally, again, a search experience is a revenue generating experience. And so it's important to start tying in conversions that are driving your revenue for your business to see how much money you're making out of your search box. And so, for the folks that have not thought about ways to monetize their search, here's just a couple of examples. So if you're a membership or subscription-based model, when folks are searching for things, you should boost that offer in search results, provided that it's not going to upset your audience. So you've got to be thoughtful and test how you really want to do that. There's many of you who are providing lead guarantees for webinars or content downloads, or even sponsored content page views. And so if you're doing that today, you're probably sending e-blasts to your list to promote this content. You're promoting in social media. You've got it showing up on the home page and on the webinar page or the white paper page, that sort of thing. And that's all driving those registrations for you, and you have a good sense of what your batting average is for whether you're hitting those lead guarantees or not. And that's the service you're providing your advertising partner. But where you could enhance that, either by ensuring that your batting average is higher because you need it to be, or you want to offer a higher lead guarantee, you could take that content and work either with your advertising partner or internally, identify the key phrases and query terms that are related to the content that you're trying to promote, and boost that content to the top of those results to ensure that that content gets engaged with and has a chance to convert at a higher rate. And then finally, everyone's trying to build a bigger email list. So to include newsletter signups in search is definitely something worth looking at. And so I think the big message to take away here is, start looking, if you're not already, at your search experience as a way to drive revenue. And if you're not doing some of these things today, hopefully this is a couple of ideas that stimulate the conversation that you'll have with your team about how to monetize the search experience a little bit more. And so some of this is important because for many of you, you've got internal teams, tech teams, engineering groups that are going to help you do this. And so in order to make that happen, you need to work with them to really ensure that they're pushing this to, boosting that content to the top of the search results or the algorithm. So if you don't have that team, make sure you're finding a way to do it. SwiftType can help you pin content to the top of query results, or walk you through ways to change your algorithm so that you can maybe help extend the virality of a piece of content based on social engagement data or other metrics that you're tracking today. But again, like, these are some of the ideas that you should start to think through, and then start to put some action plans in place for how you can enhance the site. And then finally, start sending in those ads. So, this is a screenshot of a demo that we give to publishers, but it's entirely possible if you're the ad team for a company going to Facebook and saying, hey, look, Facebook, we're getting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of folks searching for Google, and we think that if we work together on really interesting native content, sponsored content, that the audience is going to engage with it. And not only will we put it into a bunch of key terms that you're already looking at today when you're doing your pay-per-click campaigns and SEO campaigns to generate downloads, around the internet, but we can leverage that on our platform as well. And I think for ad sales teams that are looking for a way to enhance their sponsored content or native ad program today, starting to kind of tie that being able to drop it into search to your advertising partners is something that advertising partners are going to start to listen to, because they're going to want that engagement. And then for folks that don't have that today, it's another tool in your tool belt. And then finally, ad networks are rather easy to ingest into search results. And it's something that if you don't have the capacity to necessarily go sell a native ad program or sponsored content program today, this is definitely something we would recommend you looking into, because we're seeing anything from $1 CPM to $6 CPM in the ad network space for search, if done correctly, and having the flexibility and control to kind of test whether you want that ad network to show up at the top of your results or in the middle of your results or at the bottom, are things that you can test over time to really, again, think about what the user experience needs to be for the audience in order to solve what that audience is looking for, but at the same time monetizing yourself. So I want to give 2 quick case studies about companies that are doing a really nice job in the search space. The first is TechCrunch, very large publisher covering the tech space. They are using SwiftType to get the flexibility and control to curate their own search experience. They're seeing search volumes increase 30%. The exit rates have decreased 49%, which is helping them generate more money, and it's helping drive the editorial schedule and engagement that they're really looking for. The second study use case that I want to share quickly is Engadget, part of the AOL family. They've actually seen 18% an increase in page views after search, which for Engadget is pretty meaningful to them. And so they're definitely looking at this as a really nice opportunity to optimize as well. Some quick resources for you guys to look into if any of this resonated with you. We have a paper that goes deep dive into how publishers should be looking into site search analytics. You can learn more about these case studies and more on our website. We're happy to provide a demo to show you how we could do this for you ourselves, or you can just jump in and go ahead and sign up for a free 14-day trial. So with that, I really appreciate the time today, and I'm going to pass it back over to Matt to start off our Q&A.
Thanks, Ben. I have a couple of questions that I got from the audience here for you. The first one, then I'm going to have a follow-up to it, is what percentage of traffic on publishing sites are you seeing that use search?
Great question. So it can range from anywhere from 2% to as high as 10%. And again, a lot of that has to do with where the search box is actually placed. So on the low end, it's going to be if you have a magnifying glass in the top right-hand corner. On the high end, it's going to be if you have an actual box that somebody can type into on the right side. We are today testing with some companies, publishers, actually putting the search box in the middle of the page to see how that works. And we will definitely let everybody know what that looks like going forward, because some companies are starting to look at monetization and see how the search experience drives revenue versus a traditional navigation experience. And so that's the food for thought.
Right. And then, as a kind of follow-up to that, you talked a little bit about, well, actually talked a lot about monetizing and using search data. How popular is it to monetize the actual search results pages, as far as like people using category filters or specific results and sponsorships on those kinds of things? Is that stuff popular? Is it effective? Are you seeing those kinds of things?
So it's popular and growing in popularity. And the reason is because companies are trying to squeeze as much dollar as they can out of that user experience with their audience. What I'll say to that is, at the end of the day, it's got to still be about the audience experience. And so, companies that aren't doing this well are ones that are slapping ads all over the place. Companies that are doing it well are ones that are really thinking through the different user paths of how people get to your site, and then what happens once you get to the site, and how what that experience looks like from the time you leave or get on there from the time you leave. And so, certainly you don't want to blast ads all over a search engine result page if it looks really tacky, to have 5 display ads on the right-hand column and 3 boxes of text ads in the results, and sponsored content at the top. But I think that there certainly is a balance there that you can find. Again, it's really going to come down to testing and making sure that the engagement after search is meaningful, because if it's not, then you're losing that trust with the audience. And again, that's got to be top of mind while you find ways to monetize.
Great, thanks. I have a couple other questions here from the audience, and a couple that I have as well. And Ben, you can answer these, or Sachin as well. I think you both have interesting things to say. One that we got from the audience is, if you're using a paywall for some content, what is the recommended ratio of free to paid online? I would add to that, does it change by industry or demographic or anything?
So this is Sachin. I can take a stab at that. So again, I think it's not necessarily a standard here. What's really important is that you recognize the type of content that people are coming back for on a regular basis. And so one of the things that our customers who have paywalls use is loyalty as a proxy for this. So are there certain topics of content that our loyal readers are reading more of? Is there a certain referral source where they're coming from? And so the loyalty as a proxy is a good way to say that if we have a very loyal audience reading these types of content or coming from these places, that's a good indication that these things have an ability to be paywalled and should be premium content over time. So I don't think we have a kind of standard ratio. I think it, again, comes down to understanding your audience first, and then using that knowledge to test experiments and figure out what works for your specific site and your specific audience.
Got it.
I would chime in just real quick and say, today you can create, very personalized experiences for your audience. And so, kind of piggybacking off loyalty, if you already know that specific users are coming to your site, or your audience is coming to your site on a regular basis, and you're able to track that, then there's no need for you to create that paywall unless that really is for an advertiser or for a different use case. So for folks that want the premium content, they can just click into it. For advertisers, make sure that paywall is there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
The other thing to potentially note here too is that a lot of publishers kind of make it dynamic. So it might be that some content is paywalled for a certain type of user and not paywalled for another type of user. And so there could be a behavioral component too, where it's not really dependent upon the ratio of content, but it's more dependent upon the audience, him or herself, as to whether this content gets paywalled or not. Or the mediated approach too, which is something that like the New York Times and other publishers use too.
So as a follow-up to that, for both of you, where I work at Vector Media Group, we build a lot of publishing sites, and a lot of times we're seeing that the decisions about these kinds of things, as you guys both said, are very driven by analytics. But what we're also seeing is that the people looking at the analytics, it's becoming a wider and wider net. And Ben, you talked about editorial using analytics, but I'm wondering what else you guys are seeing. Are there other people in the company that should be seeing that? Should it just be something that everybody looks at? Is it down to the individual contributor level, or should it be editorial? Who should be looking at all of this?
So in my
editorial.
opinion,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Sachin. You first.
Cool, man. Yeah. So in my opinion, it should be everybody at the organization, and let me tell you why that can be kind of game changing. Because if you have everybody that's looking at analytics across your organization, they're all making decisions, or at least having their decisions informed by the data that's coming into their site, by their audience making decisions about what they want to read and where they're coming from. So you're doing two things. One is you're actually getting everybody in the organization closer to their audience. Data is just a means of their audience telling you what they care about, where they're coming from. And ultimately, if you have more and more people at your organization understanding your audience, that in and of itself is going to have a really positive result. The second big reason is that it can be a way to act in a more agile way across your company. So for example, say for the next quarter, I'm the CEO of XYZ publisher, and I know that over the next quarter, we need to really focus on driving up our social audiences. We're seeing that that's having kind of shifting tides in the marketplace overall, and that's how I want to architect my strategy. So now through analytics, I can use the social metrics as a means to make decisions across my organization. I want to have everybody focused on increasing the number of shares that we have with Facebook, with Twitter, with LinkedIn, whatever it might be. And then quarter two comes by, and you said, okay, we did a really good job of driving social audiences, but now I want to think more about driving those loyal audiences that ultimately is going to be an opportunity for us to put paywalled or premium content as a revenue source. And so now through analytics, you can shift the way that people are evaluating their site from being social to now being a loyal audience. We want to evaluate our content by the number of loyal visitors that are visiting our content. And with just a mandate like that, you've shifted the entire strategy and approach of the organization. That's extremely powerful, but it only happens with the prerequisite that everybody in your organization is looking and using analytics as a way to make decisions across the org.
I'm going to piggyback off Sachin and say, yes, analytics should be widely adopted by the entire company. From a search perspective, again, at least the search insights that companies can take advantage of, it's intent data. It's what your audience is looking for. And so it's really important that the entire company knows what that is, as well as where those blind spots are, so that everybody can get around enhancing the content you've already got and then removing those blind spots for those segments of the audience that aren't finding the best experience.
So if an organization, if a publisher is looking at analytics, everybody's bought into it, everybody believes in this idea of looking at the analytics to decide how to better monetize. Let's say they're seeing that certain authors or writers are doing best on the platform. Could you two give some suggestions to the audience about how they can better leverage the platform's authors and even just random content contributors to drive revenue? Like, what could they be doing to take advantage of that? Sachin, did you want to take that first?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Cool. Yeah. So, I think it's something that I don't think enough publishers actually do right now. I think authors and content creators are brands in and of themselves, and we see this happening because as a content creator, if you're doing really, really great stuff, you're able to build up a really large audience on external platforms like Twitter or like Facebook, and simply by building that audience, you're actually a big traffic driver for the publisher overall. And so I think more and more publishers should enable their authors, their content creators to create their own brands, to highlight their own brands, and then use that as a way to drive traffic or to drive monetization at the end of the day. So I think it's an important thing to do. Obviously, you first need to understand who those authors are that are the big drivers or have those large audiences, and so I think that's where kind of the analytics piece can come into play there. But once you have that, let's highlight them, let's put a spotlight on them, and let's amplify their voice and their ability to reach audience, because that's going to have I think a compounding effect in a positive way back to the site overall.
From a search perspective, the way that you can amplify it is making sure that those authors are showing up at the top of results, and you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can either put them in at the top of specific queries to the extent that you know that those authors are writing about the keywords and topics that are resonating with your audience. At the same time, you could leverage tags to say, hey, when I have an author that's getting a ton of engagement, I want to boost that author's content to the top of search results. I mean, that's something that can absolutely be done today without much difficulty, and really elevate your author's voice and improve the monetization opportunities there.
We just got, kind of on that note, we just got a question for Sachin that is actually a very interesting one, and I've heard a couple people talking about this. But Sachin, do you see like the self-publishing platforms like Medium, and there are a couple others, undercutting the power of the larger publications, and how does that affect what you're talking about?
I don't think so. So I think Medium is just another form of kind of distributed content, or another place that content can live. And I think it's important to recognize the type of content that does well on Medium. They tend to be more serious. They tend to be more almost kind of expose style, or revealing in some interesting way about an organization or an individual, and that can be leveraged by publications. But I don't think ultimately they're going to undercut publications. The reason why I say that is because Ev Williams, the creator of Medium, the founder of Medium, was also the guy that created Blogger.com back in the day before Google acquired it. And if we were to see undercutting happening, then I think that would have happened back with his first platform, Blogger.com, but that wasn't the case. I think it's just another form of getting content out there, and if you can leverage it for its opportunity to reach new audiences, for your ability to match the audience that's there with the type of content that you can create, then it does ultimately turn into an opportunity for you, and it won't be something that undercuts. So yeah, recognize, my overall advice is recognize for each of these platforms for what they do best, and then try to leverage that for your own sites. Don't be scared, or don't think that by publishing content there, we're necessarily going to lose our audience, or we're going to lose our ability to reach audiences.
Okay. And we're kind of coming up to the end of our time here, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask for final thoughts. Sachin, why don't you go first? Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to add about this?
Yeah, I think I do have a couple of things maybe to wrap it up, which is like, the overwhelming thing of what I see when I walk into publishers is before they even think about revenue or monetization, it comes down to really understanding where they're at today, understanding where they can potentially spin up new revenue opportunities, but aligning that with who their audience is, where that audience is coming from. So the first thing that you need to do before going down the route of multi-channel revenue streams is be really honest with yourself and recognize whether you understand your content and audience as best as you can. If you get to that point, then the opportunities start to show themselves And for us, we see it through the data where you start to recognize that there's a type of content or a type of segment of your audience that aligns better with a different revenue stream. And so those doors start to open up, and you start to see more clearly where the future opportunities lie, but it stems from really kind of understanding where you sit today with your content and your audience. And that's what we try to solve and architect our platform for at Parsley. So it all kind of ties back to that for us, but it really is where we see the most value and thinking about the future and thinking about how to move forward.
Ben, how about you? Any thoughts you have to wrap this up?
I would say that for folks joining this session, you're spending a lot of time thinking about how to, grow your audience and how to make it bigger. And Google and a lot of the social media platforms are, really becoming playing a larger role in helping you, generate a larger audience. But what I would say is that once that audience finally has hit your site and they start, getting an experience from you, it's really important for you to be thinking about how the search box plays a role in that experience. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to see that it really can uncover a lot of unlocked value for you as you try to build a better relationship with your audience, regardless of whether you're delivering evergreen content or content that's in the real time. So from an experience perspective, definitely give it a look because it will certainly help drive revenue for you in the long run.
Thank you guys both so much. Just as a reminder to our audience, on the webinar today, you had Sachin from Parsley, and they're an analytics platform that provides audience insight for publishers. You had Ben from SwiftType. They're a powerful hosted search solution that can be implemented with just a few lines of code. And I'm Matt Weinberg from Vector Media Group. We're vectormediagroup.com. We are a full-service digital agency in New York with just tons of experience designing and building publishing sites. Please, audience, just stay on after you disconnect, fill out our 2-minute survey so we know how we did and if this was helpful. Thank everybody so much for their time today.
Thank you. Thanks for moderating, Matt.
Thank you, everybody.